gather round in kindness. Here we all are together in kindness. Hine matovu manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matovu manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matovu manayim, 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 shevet achim gam yachad.
Shabbat Shalom. For those who are watching at home, we also want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom and a friendly reminder that a little later in the service we'll be looking at some text related to this next week in the Jewish calendar, and you can find that text also by going to the Beth-El website, where there'll be a little box that says 9 of 2023, and if you click on it, there will come up the exact same thing they're looking at here. And if you don't know where the Beth-El webpage is, it might be where you're watching this service from. But if not, you can go to bethelfw.org. Also want to wish Shabbat Shalom to anyone watching at home. I want to ask the congregation here to see something that you don't really benefit from. And I want to ask you, before you wish each other a Shabbat Shalom, if you're able to turn your head, I don't know, even 180 degrees, but maybe you'll turn around, because through the work of Hollis Weiner and Judy Cohen and a number of other people, we've been able to put the last remaining windows up here in the back of the chapel, but it's not until you're really leading services you say, oh, only we are benefiting from this. And of course I mention those at home because you can't see them either, but it'd be a really good reason to come in sometime in the next few weeks. They are just 11 beautiful, beautiful windows, and they really blend in. I mean, it's as if they were almost made for the chapel, not the old Beth-El sanctuary. They really have the same type of coloring and wood, so that's a nice way to welcome Shabbat. Another way to welcome Shabbat is to turn around to people you know, and especially people you don't know, and see, they know just what to do.
See? Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, Robert.
Shabbat Shalom. Yes, yes, yes. Yep. Let us bless the Shabbat candles, sanctify their glow, bask in their warmth. We have completed 6 days of doing and creating. With heedful heart and open homes, we greet Shabbat, the day of rest. Come Shabbat and extend to our home calm and repose, grace and grandeur to the work of our hands. As we bless Shabbat, we ask Marilyn Stensler to come up to light the Shabbat candles. The blessing is on page 120. There's always a backup, thank goodness.
with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the light of Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Let's read together on page 124 at the bottom. May the door of the synagogue be wide enough to receive all who hunger for love, all who are lonely for friendship. May it welcome all who have cares to unburden, thanks to express, hopes to nurture. May the door of the synagogue be narrow enough to shut out pettiness and pride, envy and enmity. May its threshold be no stumbling block to young or straying feet. May it be too high to admit complacency, selfishness, and harshness. May this synagogue be all for all who enter, the doorway to a richer and more meaningful life. We turn to page 138 for Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi likra kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likra kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Shamo v'zachor v'dibur echad hishmianu el hamiuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shemu tiferet v'litila. Lecha Dodi likra kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likra kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha ki mekor ha'beracha merosh mikedem nesucha sof ma'aseh b'mashavat chila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri, hitoreri, ki ba'oref, humi ori, uri, shir daberi v'yavod Adonai, alayich nigla. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Boi v'shalom ateret bala, gam besimcha utzu chola toch emunei am segula. Boi chala, lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela.
Turn to page 144 as we transition from the welcoming of Shabbat to the more central section of our service with the Chatzi Kaddish.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba, be'alma divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'chayedecho beit Yisrael, bagala u'bizman kariv,
Page 148, we read together, Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, and thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tsebaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'ma'ariv Arabim.
Ahavat olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta, al kein Adonai Eloheinu b'shokbeinu v'kumeinu nasiach b'chukecha, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, uv'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed, ki hem chayenu, ve'orech yameinu, uvahem nege yomam v'layla, nege yomam v'layla, ve'ahavatcha al tasir, mimenu le'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev amo Yisrael, Ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad, Baruch Shem kevod malchuto leolam va'ed.
Please be seated as together on page 154 we join in English in these words of V'ahavta from the Torah. You shall love
Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might.
Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children.
Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God. I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of Egypt to become your God. I am Adonai your God. Adonai Elohechem Emet.
Page 158, the song our people sang as they crossed from slavery into freedom.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osei pele, nora tehilot osei pele, malechutecha ra'u v'necha, bokei hayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, ze'lianu v'yameru, Adonai imloch, Adonai imloch.
keep us safe and connected to one another and under your shelter as night arrives.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'shalom Ve'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'shalom Ve'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim. Cause us to lie down in perfect peace and raise us up to life. Spread your tent of peace over us and keep us safe tonight. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'shalom Ve'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim Ve'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim.
We sang that for a year and a half at the beginning of Havdalah on Zoom during COVID, and you can see it's caught on. Everyone kind of remember that beautiful tune. But it's not the end of Shabbat, it's just the beginning. And so we take a deep breath. We take a moment to ground ourselves as we turn to Tefillah, central prayer section of our service, as we ask, oh God, that you will help us to find the words in these next few moments to connect to you and to those around us. Page 164. Please rise.
Adonai sifatai tifta ufi agite hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka,
Page 171 together. Days pass and the years vanish, and we walk sightless among miracles.
God, fill our eyes with seeing and our minds with knowing. Let there be moments when your presence, like lightning, illumines the darkness in which we walk. Help us to see wherever we gaze that the bush burns unconsumed, and we, clay touched by God, will reach out for holiness and exclaim in wonder, how filled with awe is this place, and we did not know it. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh.
Take some time on the next few pages, standing or seated, for your own personal prayers.
And the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you. Adonai, 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 my rock and my Redeemer.
Before we turn to prayer for healing, I wanted to take a look at a sheet. Again, a reminder for those who are watching at home, even if you're not watching at home right now, you can go to the Beth-El webpage, bethelfw.org, and there right below the service is a little box that says Tisha B'Av 2023, and you click on it and you will see this if you're at home. I wanted us to take a moment to look at this. So Wednesday night is Tisha B'Av. It is the 9th of Av. It is a day that has really been a day of commemoration and sadness for the Jewish people throughout all of Jewish history. The early Reform movement didn't kind of quite know what to do with Tisha B'Av. They didn't really want the temple in Jerusalem rebuilt. They didn't want to return to the sacrificial cult, and yet it was a day of mourning over destruction. So initially they kind of moved it over here, but in the last few decades, the Reform movement's really come back to saying, let's acknowledge Tisha B'Av, let's study it in our camps, let's talk about it with our kids. So there's been a real step back to say you don't have to want the rebuilding of the third temple to acknowledge the 9th of Av as really the most important Jewish day of mourning in the year. Before we talk about the 9th of Av, which is very unique in that it's really not just about Jewish tragedy, it's about a loss of space, right? So we have Yom HaShoah. We have other days during the year, but the 9th of Av is really about the loss of Jewish space, and sovereignty. It's a very specific time of loss. It acknowledges the beginning of the diaspora. So I thought before we looked at that, I wanted to point out a beautiful poem called Green Sickness. And rather than read it all out loud, I want you to take a look at it for a moment. I'll give you a moment just to kind of glance over and read at it, see what catches your eye. Here it is. On this side, the non-Hebrew side. So I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but how does this poem make you feel? A lot of different ways you could react to it. I'll ask another question. What do you think about the green? In other words, for those of you who are at home and aren't pulling up the sheet I said you could pull up, Laurel Chen is talking about a summer of grief, a summer of sadness, the field of her. You always want to be very careful when you start breaking down a poem, because I've never met Laurel Chen, and she might show up and say, that's not at all what I want, because I haven't gotten to talk to her. But what I'm pulling from this in part, maybe it's because this is the 9th of Av week, the 9 days before Tisha B'Av, she's talking about this period in her life with some depression. She's talking about a sense of loss. She compares this loss to a land. And most interestingly for me, the green seems to represent the depression and the loss. I needed to read it a few times to get that, because for me, green is usually growth. Green is usually the beginning of spring. Green is usually life. And one of the verses that really threw me off when she, it's a few times in here, she talks about at the edge of every green lies an ocean. So the ocean is the hope. The green is what she's stuck in now. Everything she touched that summer when she was in grief was green. But the bruises will fade. They'll go from green and blue to skin. So she's coming back to life. She's using green as a sense of loss, of sadness, of depression. But we also know that green is growth. And then perhaps one of the things she offers in here, which is a beautiful sentence in the top of the 4th paragraph, if green is love with nowhere to go, then oh, I've loved so immensely. So a very just beautiful passage of just, if grief is that feeling of love or of loss, of disconnected, of you're not a part of something, then I've loved immensely. So she's not just talking about a certain type of sadness, she's talking about a pain from a disconnection. She talks about, in this field, my ancestors murmuring, go home soon, no country wants me back and I'll be okay. So, there's a sense of hope in this, maybe not on the first read, but read it a couple more times. There's a sense that out of this kind of growing green, you eventually get to the sea. You eventually get to another opportunity. You eventually grow through your loss. I mean, that, if not, what is this loss? And now, of course, I'll show my hand, which is that Laurel Shen lives, well, she likes to say she lives in the Ohlone territory. Now, I didn't really know what the Ohlone territory is, and I'm probably saying it wrong, because the Ohlone territory doesn't technically exist. It is an area in the Bay Area of San Francisco where the Ohlones were an indigenous people. And when the Department of Land was going from place to place to say, where are there still indigenous people we need to protect, they said, well, everybody from this tribe is extinct. But it turned out they weren't extinct. They just were dispersed all over that part of California. So once you realize that she's writing from some part of the Bay Area, but saying, but I live in the Ohlone territory, she's talking about, among other things, some sense of loss. Where is her home? What does it mean to be in a field that's her field that isn't quite her field? Where does she kind of get to that healing, that she is grounded, that she is rooted again? So it's a very, I can't speak to the other parts of Laurel's life because I don't know her, but it's a very specific type of sense that you are disconnected from roots. I share that because, as I said, we're in the 9-day period leading up to the 9th of Av. The whole first part of the month of Av brings us to the 9th of Av. The commemoration of Tisha B'Av marks these calamities in this month, this Hebrew month. The destruction of the first temple in 586, the destruction of the second temple in 70 of the Common Era, and then over time, diaspora Jews added dimensions, so that the Spanish expulsion takes place in 1492, right around this time. The English expulsion takes place right around this time. It's a very weird, kind of disturbing kind of calendar series of events, that all of these events, I could give you many, many more, but I'm going to stop there, are all tied to the 9th of Av, this sense of loss. So we have the sense of loss as a diaspora. You know, we may be comfortable in America, but we know we're not really from America, even if we've been 4 or 5 generations. There are quotes around the building from the Bible. There are, I'll give you an easy one. Even the fact that the Hadassah windows have been put up as art here by some of the women in this congregation, which are from the hospital in Israel, is a sense that, well, we're here, but we have some connection we can't quite define to over there, even if we've never been there. So there's a sense that American Jews, that we're from here, but we're kind of wandering. There's a sense of being uprooted. And then, of course, the primary observances of Tisha B'Av are the destruction of the temple. And so for us to imagine that the Jews of that time saw the temple in Jerusalem as God's domain. So we might say the Babylonians had a better army. But for the Jews of that time, the only way to understand that loss wasn't that the Romans had a better army. We can use the next expulsion. But that somehow we had fallen in our task. And so on the 9th of Av, some Jews fast. Many, when they read Eicha next Wednesday night, sit on the floor. The observances are very similar to Yom Kippur. Those who are physically able might choose not to eat part of the day or drink, or they used to call anointing themselves. We'd say putting on perfume. So it's the almost identical set of rules. There are a couple differences with Yom Kippur. So it's safe to say that even if we don't keep or observe the 9th of Av, it is the second most important fast day in Judaism. If you go to Jerusalem, you'll find thousands of people gathered in front of the wall in small groups of 10, 12, 15, all chanting from the Book of Lamentations and in separate times. It's not communal in that sense. It's a community of hundreds and hundreds of groups all going about at night at their own speed and chanting in front of this wall. The Book of Lamentations, one of the 5 sacred scrolls, like Esther and Song of Songs and other festivals, talks about the sense of grieving. I want to just chant a couple lines from it for you, because the trope is totally different than all other tropes, all other chanting tones in Judaism. And also, you'll see in the English the tone of it. Alas, lonely sits the city, once great with people. She was there, great among nations. She's now become like a widow. The princess among states is become a thrall. She weeps in the night, her cheek wet with tears. There's none to comfort her. Of all her friends, her allies have betrayed her. They have become her foes. Judah has gone into exile. So this lament, written, it's unclear who, some say Jeremiah, within just a few decades after the destruction of the temple, really presents for us Jerusalem as a widow, as a mother whose children have been thrown out. It presents Judah, a tribe, as exiled. So there's a sense of real disconnection, not necessarily so different than the poet on the other side. What happens when you get that sense of loss of God's favor in this lonely city? And you can hear it in the tune. Echa yashva vadad ha'ir rabati am haita ka'almana rabati vagoyim sarati bamdinot haita lamas. It is a lament. It is someone crying out. It doesn't really sound like anything you're going to hear chanted the rest of the year for the Torah, the other Megillot. It is that lonely is the city. You can imagine thousands of people all chanting it at different times in Jerusalem, that calling out. And yet, the very end of the 9th of Av, what would be Thursday afternoon, evening for us, it takes on a very different tone. It becomes almost messianic. People begin to stand up, they begin to change, they begin to become more hopeful. Like the end of the book of Lamentations, they say, "Return us to you, O God, then truly shall we return, renew our days as in the mist." If you say, "Oh, that sounds kind of familiar," we also say it at Yom Kippur before the open ark. We say over and over, "Cause us to return to you, O God, as in days past." And we're saying at Yom Kippur, we want to return to you. We've gotten so far apart. On Tisha B'Av, it's bring us back to you. But the message for some Jews is, well, God has not forgotten us. That there is that growth. There is that opportunity. There is possibility in the future. We have to work for L'taken olam, the repair of the world. So Tisha B'Av takes us through this process. And then the most hopeful piece is that it begins 7 weeks of repair. There are exactly 7 weeks. I mean, there are 7 weeks in a day, exactly, from the 9th of Av to Rosh Hashanah. And that's not accidental. It's all thought out, the whole system. So at the moment when Jews in Israel say the temple was destroyed, we don't have sovereignty, we've fallen so far apart, they then begin the process of saying, let me begin to think about my own life, let me think about my own deeds, let me try to come closer and closer so that by the time we come to Rosh Hashanah, we're together as a community again. We're looking forward to a new year, even as we're atoning and trying to say we're sorry. Who knows? Maybe that's what this poet's saying. The poet's not Jewish as far as I know, but saying that the green is both the sadness, but the green is also the hope. The green is the opportunity to know that you're going to come out of it. We know there are many, many challenging things here for us, for Israel, for the people around. We're not going to get into it tonight. It's not a political sermon. Tisha B'Av is a day that says, yes, there is a lot to mourn for. Right? It's not all good. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. But at the same time, we take a day to acknowledge it. We take a day to feel that disconnection when we've been uprooted, but to know that there is the possibility of bringing strength and hope and peace and wholeness in the future. So I wanted to show you this kind of creative way of thinking about Tisha B'Av. I wanted you to look at what Jews traditionally say, because often it's off our radar, and we're not really aware that this is what's going on in the Jewish community around the world. And I imagine There'll be a lot of reflection in Israel this Tisha B'Av. I imagine, as in good Jewish fashion, there'll be lots of people saying, see, this is to each other, this is why we have Tisha B'Av and not agreeing, but who knows, maybe there'll be a call there that brings some of them together into some kind of dialogue. And in a moment we will turn to Aleinu, but before we do, I do want to point out to you, of course, that that's also what Aleinu is. That Aleinu is also a prayer that talks about the day when the whole universe will litaken olam b'malchut Shaddai, when the world will be restored for the sake of God in the universe. So that message is always there. And even if we just, even if we just say, I like Aleinu, it's a nice sing-songy prayer, you shouldn't miss what's going on in every single Jewish service. That before the service ends and before we say Kaddish, whether you're thinking about that or not, we're saying a prayer the diaspora and Israel Jews have said for centuries, to say, one day may all these broken pieces be together again. On that note, words from Psalm 118, Min ha-meitzar karati ya, aneni b'mar chavya, Adonai li lo yira ma yaseh li adam. I call upon God from a narrow place, and God answers me expansively. For when God is with me, I have no fear. I shall see a day of strength and a day of healing, a day of being overcome. And so out of those narrow places, we think of all those who are in need of healing, all those who are in need of strength. We mention the names of Charna Blumberg, Charlotte Fiwas, Allison Getz, Christopher Long, Judy Cohen, Robert Klein, Idalis Rivera, Anita Kabuti, Jeannie Rosenblum, William Westerman, Ann Westerman, Lisa Bond, Barbara Leffer, Karen Kaplan, Susie Kornblit, Carol Ruth Brooks-Saylor-Alcock, Susan Flappin, Suzanne Slatkin, Peter Levy, Benjamin Rosser, and any names you might wish to add. And we know there are others who are in homes or in hospital beds, perhaps alone, perhaps surrounded by family who do not wish to have their names read out loud. But we know that they are in need of strength, and our prayers are with them tonight for strength together. And so for all of them we say, Baruch atah Adonai rofei hacholim. O God, who is the source of wholeness, we pray that you will bring them healing and wholeness. We're going to turn to page 586. I said something about Aleinu, so we're going to turn to Aleinu, and we're going to stand before the open ark. Oh, I thought you were going to use that. Thank you. No, okay.
Aleinu l'shapeach l'adon ha'kol, l'ateit gedula v'yotzeh b'reishit. Shalom asadik b'gei ha'ratzon, ve'lo samanu mishpachot ha'adama. Shalom samtoheinu kahem, ve'kor aleinu k'chol hamonam. V'anachnu korim, u'mishtakavim u'modim, lifnei melech, malchei hamlakim, hakadosh baruch hu. V'ne'emar, v'haya Adonai, lemelech al kol haaretz, v'yom hahu, hiyeh Adonai echad, u'shemo
Please be seated. Before we turn to the Kaddish, please read with me on 595. together. There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light, long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we love. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. Think of those we have lost, mentioned, and it's the custom for those who are comfortable doing so, if you wish to rise when you hear the name of one you are remembering. The Shloshim in the 30-day period of mourning, we mentioned David Felder, Sandra Freed, and Karen Delavan. In addition, we mentioned the Yartzites, the anniversaries of their deaths observed this week. We mentioned Stephen Allen, Abraham Antwile, William A. Bermont, Helen Bressert, Gabriel Cohen, Florence Cohn, Mae Joseph Davidson, Nathan Eckhart, Sarah Fite, Lana Jean Fleischman, William Benjamin Freed, Morris Hendelman, Rudy Kemp, Pauline Claire Levy, Thomas Leachman Lacey III, Herman Lehman, Peril Brown Lynette, Roger Moss, Sarah Nuremberg, Arthur Pritchard, Burton Lee Rackover, Hugh Reeder, Alfred M. Rosenfield, Herbert Rothstein, Simon Rubinson, Rochelle Sachs, Rolly Schur, Marvin Schuster, B.B. Schwartz, Sylvan Schwartz, Hazel Shapiro, Mary Levine Schwartz, Alice Van Netta, Gussie Wiener, Richard Whistleberg, and Anna N. Wolfson. If there are any other names of people who are here, want to add a name that you're remembering on this Shabbat? Otherwise, we rise to offer strength, page 598. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbi. Divrach Yerutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayichon v'yomeichon. V'chayichon Israel. Bagalal v'zman kariv imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbi mevarach li'olam l'amei amaya. Barach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitala. Shmeid kudsha b'richu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush v'chata v'nechemata. Dami ram bi'amal v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. V'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramah. Hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. V'imru amen. Zichronam livracha. May all of their memories be for us a blessing as we say, amen. Please be seated. Our closing song as we join together.
Oseh Shalom.
Oseh shalom.
Oseh Shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'yimeru amen. Oseh Shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'yimeru amen. Oseh Shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'yimeru amen.
We're going to turn to page 123 for the Kiddush. And as we're going to see if we have any helpers for the Kiddush, I want to just thank Angie. I want to put out a plug that in 3 weeks on Saturday night, August 12th, Angie's going to prepare a cafe night for us here as part of the preparation for her new album, CD, MP3, all of those things. And I hope you'll come and join us. And also the night before, when our guest speaker will be Pastor Charles Foster Johnson, the founder of Pastors for Texas Children, will be speaking to us about a very important bill that concerns him and that surely should concern all people of faith that he wants to talk to us about regarding public school education. He is a magnificent speaker, so you've got lots to do that weekend if you're here and in town and enjoying the heat with the rest of us. Thank you so much, Angie. And we're going to continue with the Kiddush. So it's on 123. Baruch atah
Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pari hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho, ve'ahava u'ratzon hinchilanu. Zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techilah lemikra'e kodesh, zecher letzviat Mitzrayim, kivanu v'charta, me'otanu kidashta, mikol Shabbat kodecha be'ahava u'ratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Amen.
And we'll continue with the Motzi, and you can grab that challah. You always help us out. It was such a, we were pulling back so more people could hear. Here we go. Start us off.
Baruch atah